well. Cool. And then we will crack into it. And then if anyone joins, I can just kind of join on in. I'm thinking we're probably going to have time for questions as we go. So if there is anything that kind of crops up, just raise your hand and shout out. But basically, hi and welcome. This is a free sales webinar hosted by me, Alana. I'm one of the co-founders of Your Success Team, which is a totally different way of thinking about how you grow your business by learning to shape it to be as unique as you are. So one of the things that we're really big on is there's no fixed formula, there's no absolutes. A lot of what we share is stuff that we have seen work. Doesn't mean it's an absolute guarantee, and as much as possible things are sort of shared as non-absolutes and options, because you've got to find the way to do this business dance that really works for you. So today is all about kind of helping debunk the, for want of a better term, fear of sales. I think we sort of as we grow in business, depending on what our background might be in terms of what we did before we came into small business, sales still has this kind of like icky connotation to it, which it feels a bit discomforting. It's a bit different to marketing, because marketing is a thing that you can do, that you're putting out there into the world, whereas sales is much more you're involved in it, and so it stings a bit more if it doesn't really work. So talking about sales today, because I've seen over the last couple of months that this is something that people in general are just struggling with, whether you're in a business to business space or business to consumer, regardless of industry. It feels like for a lot of us, marketing is the safe space to run away to, and sales is the thing that can sometimes, put us off or get us feeling that little niggle and that imposter syndrome. So that's why the focus is on sales today. And if I was gonna describe the difference, I would say marketing is your shop window, and how you dress it up to invite people in or to catch those attentions when they're walking past. Sales is the quality of the interactions when they walk into the shop. So straight away, when I use that analogy, you can see that that's become a bit more personal, right? Because you've got that, I'm in it, I'm face to face, or I'm interacting. And I think that's sometimes the thing that can make us get a bit more scared, because it feels like there's a bit more personal investment in it. So let's kick into it. So hopefully off the back of this session, if I do a good job as a talking head with you all today, we're going to kind of cover off some fundamentals. So, and I'm sort of drawing on probably over a decade of coaching people in sales when I've pulled this sort of stuff together to try and make it as impactful but also like industry generic as possible. So some things that I know to be true about sales. Our presence is really, really important. A lot of great sales is about connection and relationships, about the quality of how much we can uncover before we offer ourselves, our products, our services as a solution. I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight as to why we have two ears and one mouth, and how you can use that to increase your odds of getting a yes in the sales process. Some ideas around how to close a sale, because I think sometimes that's the part of sales that can scare us the most. And then how important follow-up is to increase sales conversions, because I think that can be the forgotten thing, that when you do it right, it's a really lovely quick win to help increase your conversions. So we will kick into it. Going to start with everyone's in sales, whether or not you think that you are or not. But I would leave you with the thought that service is sales and sales is service. So we've all been sold to really well. We've all been sold to really badly. And if you were going to have a bit of a self-reflect on what it was that was in those great interactions and what it was that was in those poor interactions, you could probably articulate that really well, and then you can kind of use that as your foundation to go, cool, so now I know how I don't want to sell and how I do want to sell. So that can be a really great place to start to think about your sales mindset, and to maybe think less like, oh, sales is just for used car salesmen and, you know, those people in suits that wear, you know, heels or ties. And, you know, I do service so different. Well, I'd actually argue that the two are really, really interchangeable. And if you're really, really, really good at service, odds are with a few tweaks, you'll be absolutely marvelous at sales. So let's get into some of the actual behaviors. Right, so here's some of the headlines that I'm going to talk about in terms of behaviors for success. So the first one's around remembering to own your own mindset. The second one is around the importance of open questions and how they'll uncover just about anything. Why it's really important to care about how you make other people feel. And sometimes you can then do away with any pressure on yourself on worrying about the outcome. And backing yourself to ask for the business. And if you've nailed the conversation, then this is actually just an easy step, and it's just a step you've got to remember to do rather than, you know, get a little bit scared and wiggle down into the corner. And following through and creating room to delight. So that's what we're going to cover off in this session. And like I said at the start, we've probably got space that if you've got questions as we go, just shout out. Otherwise, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A at the end if anyone's got anything. So owning your mindset. This one is all around the power of presence and the importance of having really great energy. I think we can probably also give an example when we've engaged with a really bored salesperson, whether that was through an interaction over the phone with someone who sounded like they were on robot mode, or that dreaded when you walk into a shop and the shop assistants are so busy talking to one another that they're not going to bother about the customer standing over here like, oh. So we can all remember those examples, and then equally I can imagine you can think of some examples when you've engaged with a salesperson or just someone that you're talking to about their products and services, and you just felt the buzz from them. And that's really, really important for us to bring into our interactions with customers or potential customers, because we as humans have this desire to want to spend time with people who have great energy or, you know, look amazing. You know, that's why celebrity endorsements are so powerful, because we think some of theirness will rub off on us if we spend time with them. So if you can really own that presence and bring all you've got to those interactions, your customers or potential customers are naturally going to feed from that and want to spend more time with you because they feel like they're going to get some of that magic back. So a way to bring this to life that might be helpful is an analogy that I used to use, which is around that of opening night. So imagine, you know, in a time that we can travel again and we're off to the West End in London, or we're heading off to Broadway and we're going to go and see something, I don't know, Cats, something cool. And it's the first time we've ever seen it, but for the performers, there is no way in heck it's their first time. It might be their 5th, it might be their 50th, it might be their 100th performance. But I'm going to bet that for us in the audience, you know, we want them to bring it as if it was the performer's first time bringing that performance to life. And so that's quite an easy thing. Oh yeah, I do that. It's actually can be quite hard to bring to life when you're, I don't know, feeling a bit under the weather. You just got the call to go pick up the kids from school or daycare. If it's your 10th sales call of the day, like when you're in the grind of actually doing, unless you're conscious of what you're bringing in that presence, it can be very easy to just slip into, you know, like method acting rather than bringing the full presence that you'd bring to a Broadway show. And so that's hopefully a way of sort of bringing that to life. So if you can think that the customer's your audience and you are the performer, and do whatever you can to reset in between interactions so that you can bring that that energy and that passion, and you should see a real difference with how people respond to that. And by bringing that passion, that consistency every time, that's a really big part of what's going to set you apart. So some reflection questions here for you, and I'll send out these slides if anyone doesn't want to take questions or work through these on the go. Is if you were to have a reflect, can you think of an example of someone who's really owned their energy and their presence when they sold you something? And if you were thinking at a really granular level, what was it about them or how they engaged with you that made you want to buy from them, and how did you enjoy that experience? And so that gives you the you as a user view. And so to reflect on that. And then if you're going to turn the tables on yourself and you're going to be really honest with yourself, on a scale of 1 being insipid, I was being a little bit of a robot, to 10, like, yep, I nailed it. Like, I was front stage center of that Cats show and like the audience were eating out of my hand. On average, how do you think you interact with your customers? So if you want to have a bit of a mull and a reflect on that, and I think that might sort of help to bring to life where you may or may not have space that you can work on your presence and your mindset. Has anyone got any questions about presence or mindset before I move on to open questions? No? All good? Okay. Okay, so the power of open questions. So a couple of things. Open questions is it's a particular skill, right? It's to work out how can you frame your questions in such a way that it turns open. And an open question being one that you can't answer with yes or no, unless you're perhaps a 14-year-old boy, they're quite good at saying no or breaking to just about everything, or maybe a 3-year-old as well. So open questions in general, it can be just a bit of a habit or a pattern for you to shift, and to be aware of how can you ask your questions so that they're more open and less yes or no. So they tend to be questions that start with, like the W's and the H, so the who, what, when, where, how. One I love to use is tell me more, and you just tell me more. And just, be really conscious of your body language and don't sound like you're reading that from a script, tell me more, but it just invites the other person to share more about what it was. And the reason that open questions are so powerful is because we love to talk about ourselves. Even quite shy people, when given someone who's really actively listening, we have a craving to be heard as humans. And I think for those of us who don't feel comfortable sharing, it's probably because we got shut down, or we haven't been actively listened to in our lives. So if you can be that amazing person who actually listens and is really conscious in your presence and really builds on letting that other person have time to talk about what it is, what that means is they're going to tell you everything you need to know to help you be able to share whether or not your product or service or what you can offer them is the right thing. The more they talk, the less you have to. So that's some of that whole, 2 ears, 1 mouth sort of thing. But it's just the more that you can not make presumptions, the more that you can get them to lead the conversation. What it does is it helps you paint a really clear picture of what benefits of your product or service you want to talk about with them, what it is that's unique about you that they could really relate to, what features they might really want. Like, it's quite different if you have someone come in. I'm gonna use an example here of, let's say we're selling vacuum cleaners, right? Me coming in with a big black German Shepherd furry dog and 2 children, I have quite different needs than someone who's in a small 40 square meter apartment and lives by themselves. So if the salesperson was able to let each of us as customers talk, you don't even need to show the apartment dweller, like the big Bertha Dyson, and you don't need to show me any of the little ones, right? Because you've learned enough about us to just take us to where is natural for us, and it just makes you look like a real expert in what you're doing, because you're like, oh, well, based on what you've told me, and you just build out what it is that you're selling based on the information that you've gathered. And people just love it because they're like, whoa, I was listened to. Whoa, how amazing that they heard me. And now look, they've actually taken on board what I've said. And I feel like I can trust them with more information should they ask for it. So that's the power of open questions and getting people to talk about what they've said. And so action over to you all to have a think about is, we'll all have different open questions that fit more naturally with our businesses than others. So it can be really helpful to have a list of open questions that you don't necessarily use as a script, but that you know are relevant when you're having conversations. And then if they're front of mind, you can bring them into the conversation much easier. So I've got a few examples there. So, like perhaps if you're in a wellness space, I was talking to a client a couple of weeks ago, and they run a studio-based wellness business. And one of the things that the owner always leads with is, rather than giving the full overview of all the options, is she just asks, what are your wellness goals? So if you're in any sort of a space that's got anything goal oriented, this can be a really powerful question, because it just means that you'll get what the customer or potential customer is aiming to do out of them without you having to verbally vomit at them the whole time. How will you use this product, this service, this thing, this feature, or tell me more about how you might use it. Tell me what's going on for you right now. This is, maybe you wouldn't do this if you were selling someone shoes, but depending on your product or service, it might make a bit more sense. What's the number one thing you'd like to change right now? Like if you're in that sort of, this one will work really well if you're in a wellness space, or you're, a hairdresser, or that sort of a business, that you can really get them to get really clear on their thinking to give you the answer. So if you want to have a go at having a think about what are some of the other questions that you think would be relevant for the sorts of conversations that you have with customers and potential customers in your business, with a focus on how can you uncover more of how that potential customer might use your product or service before you get to offering your solution, if that makes sense. Has anyone got any questions about the power of getting people to talk about themselves or open questions? Okay, so we'll move on to, you might have guessed this one might be my favorite. But this one sort of stems from one of my absolute favorite quotes, is a Maya Angelou one, which is, people will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that this is one that we can, because of some of how our society is wired, I think sometimes when we're in business, we can forget that we're in this for a really long game, and how you make someone feel, regardless of whether or not they choose to engage with your product or service, is actually worth far more to your business longer term, if you make them feel good, that is. Disclaimer, you want them to leave feeling really good about themselves. That's really worthwhile to your business longer term over the focus on an instant sale. And I know that we can feel like we want to win the business, like we have that drive when we're in business. We want to really feel like we've had the win. And we get lots of messages around that in terms of what we're consuming in the market and media and things like that. But we're here for a long game. And it's a very small world. In particular, New Zealand is a very small country. And so how you leave other people feeling after their interactions with you is so important, regardless of if they choose to do business with you, if they just walk into your shop and walk out. You never know who they might know, or who they know who might know. We're not particularly good about talking about the people that we really love or really felt great being around, but we're really quick to share if people annoy us. So as much as it's hard, I think it's something like, if you have the stats are if you're engaging with people and you've got, I don't know, 10 people who really loved your service, only 2 of them will talk about it to someone else. On the flip side, if you have 10 people who really didn't like what you did, 8 of them would talk about it to others. That's apparently the ratio in New Zealand. I'd like to think that we could start to, shift some of that advocacy, but you can see why it's really important, right? Because you don't know when you're going to get that chance of a retake on how you make someone feel. So the feelings that people are left with are more important than the outcome, and great feelings create advocates. And I could run a whole nother session, and I probably will in time, around the power of advocacy. But essentially an advocate is someone who will share with friends and family. They will advocate for your business to say, I love this business, this product, this service, this whatever, because of. Now, if you can crack that with your customers, that's your most sustainable form of customer engagement, sales and marketing you will ever get. And so if you start with that outcome in mind every time you enter an engagement with anybody, because you can have people not buy from you or not choose to engage your business or services, and they can still be advocates. And that's really, really powerful. I think we've all, a non-business, non-sales example of this is we've all had a job interview, right, where it was just awful. Like maybe we never even heard back after sending through our CV, or we left and it was just, like a dragon's den interview, and we just left and we're like, whew, I don't even want that job, right? That company did themselves a disservice, regardless of whether or not they were going to hire you, because that's the impression you then held of that organization, and it would take a lot to shift that. On the flip side, if you went for an interview with a company and you were made to feel really welcome, you got back too timely, you were treated with respect, it was a really warm, open, communicative process, even if you didn't get the job, odds are you'd still feel, like okay towards that company. You might not like be their biggest raving fan, but you've not left with a feeling of distaste. And that's why it's really important to have that same focus in all of your business interactions, because you never know who you're engaging with, who may turn out to be a customer or know someone who could be a customer. So this is your suppliers. This is even this is even your competitors. This is like, I don't know, if you're at the farmers market, this is the other stall holders. These are the people just walking past. These are the people walking past as you're unpacking your car to go to a market. It's everyone that you touch in your business ecosystem has the potential to become an advocate. So it's really important that you're genuine in your engagements, just as you will be with a customer, if that makes sense. And yeah, that old ratio, great way to get people feeling good about you, is to give them the chance to talk about themselves, but also to get them feeling good about themselves. And this is where, if you can be observant and curious and looking to delight, you can find things to compliment most people on. And that goes a really long way. Like if you love how someone's got their nails painted, or if you love, I don't know, someone's coffee mug, there's so much that you could see if you're really, really being present in that interaction, that you could pay out as a compliment that will leave someone feeling a little bit more puffed up than before they entered that interaction with you. So that's another little tip to make them feel great. So your sort of reflection or action around caring how you make other people feel is, can you have a think about what's the best experience you can recall of being sold to, and what it was in particular that made you stand out. And that should give you some pretty powerful words that you can then reflect on and go, and would I like to create the same for my customers? And then you can go about thinking, well, how do I incorporate all of the rest of these things that I'm learning about today to replicate that feeling in my engagement with other people? And so then you can take that and think about, what could you change about your experience to create more room for delight in the customer sales process? So is it how you greet people when you're first engaging with them? Is it how they leave? Lynn, just because I know you're here. Is it because they get a cuddle? There's so much that you can wrap in that's appropriate for your sales process that really will strengthen getting people to feel really good about themselves. Has anyone got any thoughts or questions around how you make other people feel? Okay, now we'll move on to the grunty one, the one that scares most people. That was a little knowing little nod that I just saw there. Back yourself to ask for the business. Now, I want to lead with, it's really human to fear rejection. We would have been kicked out in saber-tooth tiger days if we hadn't done what the rest of the cave wanted to do. So it's actually neurologically hardwired into our brains to do that which is not going to make us feel rejected. So leading with that disclaimer, it's really, really, really human to feel it personally and to be scared of rejection. And I had someone ask me, how do you get over the sting when you get a no? And I was like, the thing is I don't know anyone who really totally is glib to a no. I think all that changes as you get more confident in yourself, as you sell more. It's your resilience, it's your ability to bounce back. Because we've got that innate wiring to feel the sting of a no, we seem to take that personally because that's just how we're wired. But what you can do is choose how you rebound. And I think that is the thing that will set you up for more sustainable success over time, is know that no's are always going to be part of sales, because no matter how great you are at conversation, sometimes it's still not going to be the right time for people. But what you can do is work on getting stronger at your rebound out. So I'm a big fan of, if you've done enough in your sales conversation process that you feel that you've really understood what your customer or your potential customer is after, and you've really been able to present to them why it is you think that what it is you have to offer answers that for them and is the solution that they're looking for, then all this step is giving them the space and the chance to say yes to what you've got to offer them. So that all that means is you've just got to build in space to your conversation process to literally invite them to answer that question. And so I love to offer questions, closing questions. To me, they feel less icky. It feels like I'm still giving the customer or the potential customer the room to offer me more that I might not have understood, that they might need to table, so that I can share more information, share more benefits with them so that they really truly understand. And it's back to that feeling thing. It gives them the feeling that they're in control, that they're not, like, this is not McDonald's, would you like fries with it? Like, this is a genuine question that you're looking to seek to invite them in. So some of the questions that I've shared here that I find quite powerful, and you can make tweaks to make them relevant to your industry, your business, your products and services, is you can go for an option close off, which is, like, this is you thinking like as if you were buying something in a shop, right? Like, would you like the blue or the green today? And so you might have options in your services that you can do that with, like, would you like option A, option B? Just sense checking. How are you feeling about all of this now? This can be a really great way for them to bring out any other points that they're still not sure on, things that they might want clarification, the objections that they've still got in their mind that they're still not quite ready to part with cash yet. And so this just gives them that safe landing space to land more of that, and remembering it's still more information that you can then work with to share more about how what you've got can help them. How's that all sounding? So this is a bit of a vague, generic, but read the room type question, like can be quite good if you're ever working with two people making a decision, like and like I'm like thinking in my brain back to the vacuum cleaner example. If we've got, two decision makers there and you can see that one of them's there and one of them's not, something like a how's that all sounding just lets you read the room to see what else might still be there that you need to uncover. Or they're like keen bean and they're like, yeah, and then they'll just like close themselves and they'll be like, right, I want the blue and I want to sign up on Monday and I'm going to come 5 times a week and it's like, how do I pay you? And that's where, then your happy days. So how's that all sounding is really gives them the room to run with it at their pace, and then you can take your lead from them. You can do a really nice summary, which I'm not particularly good at this one because this works for people who are much more logically minded. And I can forget to be logically minded. So this is one of those, based on what I've learned from you today, my recommendation would be this thing over here, because of this thing over here, which is its key benefit, based on this thing over here that you told me. So you can see that that's a little bit more of a formula. But where this is really powerful is when you've got multiple options for people to consider, or you have multiple benefits and you really want to convey to the customer or potential customer that you really get why this will help them. So this is a very, very powerful way of being able to share all of what you've absorbed and learned from them back out to them. And this is where they'll be like, whew, look at that slick person listening to everything that I said and like, they get me, I'll take 4, thank you, genius person. So if you can remember to do this, or just practice it and lead with this a bit more front and center if this feels like this could work for you. I have seen this work time and again, regardless of industry, regardless of who the customer is, regardless of price point, because this really structured, you just don't say it like a robot, like you structure it in a nice practice, well-versed kind of way. This conveys that you've really, really listened and understood the customer. And then you can do another one, which is any other questions about how we work or about XYZ product. And same thing, what this does is gives you the chance to see if there's anything else there that you haven't been able to answer or clarify for the customer, and then they'll share that back to you. So that's a little bit around how you can actually do that let me ask for the business step. So your action or reflection for this particular sales behavior is, if you know your own confidence when you're engaging with your clients, and hopefully with a bit of reflection you can do that, and the scenarios that you work with most of the time with your customers or potential customers, if you can have a brainstorm of one, 2 or 3 ideas, questions that you can ask to close your sale. And that way you can turn them into a really unique version of questions that feel natural, because the words that I choose or how I deliver asking for the business when I'm closing a sale will be quite different to what you'll use. We're all really, really unique. And so this is one of those things that's it's worth spending the time doing and then practicing. And you might be an idiot and like practice in front of your mirror, or practice with a friend, or practice with a dog, or practice when out walking the dog. But the more that you can practice this and then remember to inject it into your conversation, the more naturally it will flow, and you will get some great increase in your conversions. Has anyone got any questions around asking for the business?
Yeah, I do. So because all of mine is done online, so like messengers, when I answer the questions and things like that, I feel like I ask all of these questions and a lot of the time they just won't reply. So like we'll plan out what they need, which is the best for them, and they're loving it and there's really good feedback, and then that's kind of it, and then they don't go on to purchase. What could I do in between that?
So it's a bit of like radio silence.
Yeah, so they're really hyped up and really excited, and they're like, yep, I'm going to go on the website and buy it, and then nothing. Yeah. So how quickly normally do your customers
make, like is it normally like it takes them a couple of days to choose, or does it take them a week or two to choose to buy one of your products?
It can be a real mixed bag, so it's really hard to know. There'll be people who I've never heard of before, and they just place an order on the website and they just go for it.
Yeah.
And then there's people who message me and they're back and forth all the time. They need help with choosing the colors, help with choosing the product, and which is totally cool. And I give them all the links to look at everything online and basically walk them through the online ordering system.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it still just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. A couple of things are coming to mind for you there, Ashley. One is it might feel a bit clunky, especially when it's messengery based rather than, like verbally or at a market or in a shop kind of environment. But if you could front end a little bit more, finding out why they're asking the questions. So, like, what is it that you're looking to, or why is it that you're looking to create a piece of keepsake jewelry? What is it that you're wanting from this? So a couple of questions at the front, not necessarily meaning that they're going to answer you any different in the middle, but what it does mean is that you can then follow up with, hey, like, I know that you were really keen to have a little piece of, Johnny's hair put in a bracelet before he went to school. How's that going? Is there anything else, that I can clarify about the process, or has it just slipped your mind? And so, like, presuming the best in them, but by remembering what they've told you up front. And for you, it'll be even easier because it's all just in the chat, right? So you're like, don't even have to store that in my brain. You can go back and you can just pocket it, like as I'm following up with you because of here's this personal thing. Is that still, and you're just kind of, I guess, bringing the personalization into the question. And I think the other thing probably for you is one of the things, and hopefully the following up stuff will be helpful for you here, is if people are busy and they'll get distracted. So sometimes just the simple act of you following up, regardless of how you ask the question, could be enough.
Yeah, so that might be the key for me then, is to go back after a while. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So should we dive into this next one and then see if that feels like it's helpful, and then if it's not, we can come back and see if there's any other questions.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. Has anyone else got any other questions around asking for the business before we move on? Yeah, all right. Okay, so like what I just alluded to, following up is it's actually a really easy thing to do, but it's so easy, it's actually quite hard to do. It's one of those tricky little conundrums of life. Sometimes the easier it is to do, we're less likely to do it because we just feel like, we're so important and amazing. Like, why shouldn't people interact with us and like want to come and buy from us? And I think this is where you really got to sit yourself down, take a bit of a stern finger, and remember where you sit in your customer's priority list. Like, yes, you are really important to you, but you're not that important to most other people. Unless they're rushing their kid and needing to see a doctor, no one really cares about how quickly anything gets done. Like, realistically, life is busy, we get distracted, and what's important to you at your time scale is not necessarily theirs. So what's really important here in your follow-up process is that you remember, which is kind of what actually I was asking about, how long does it normally take a customer to buy from you? You sort of need to have that paradigm to work with. Like, normally will they purchase within an hour, within a day, within a week, within a month? Because that will help inform how quickly you follow up. Because I think one of the things that can scare us about following up is we feel like we're nagging stalker, and we don't want to be nagging stalker, which comes back to that fear of rejection. So I think if you can think that, most people see follow-up when it's done with genuine intention and at a respectful cadence or time frame, they see that as a service. They're like, oh, thank you. Like, I'll give you guys an example. We needed to get our heat pumps serviced. Life admin is just a nuisance, right? And I don't know about you guys, but it always gets deprioritized on my list. Like, I'm like, that is a not making it into one of my top quadrants of where I need to spend my time. And so you get a call and then you got a voicemail and then you go, oh, I've got to remember to return that voicemail when I'm not driving in the car, and then when I've actually got capacity to open the diary and check when they can come, and that. And then I'm like, oh, it's too hard, so I'll just ignore it for another week. So smart air conditioning service people left a voice message, just followed up by email. Smart. A week later, and said, hey, not sure if you got our voice message, but we've got an appointment next Tuesday at 1, if that would work. I was like, sweet thanks, because they email and I can check my personal emails in the evening when I've actually got capacity. I'm like, perfect, because of course I can't talk to anyone at that time. So they put themselves in my shoes, and so I replied, Tuesday at 1, all done, with none of that back and forth. So that was, I think, a really great example of sensible follow-up. They didn't feel like they were stalking or nagging. And so this can be really important if you've got, and I think, Ashley, yours is one of those examples that it's unique and it's a quirky purchase that's most often probably going to be gift inspired. And so gifts typically mean people doing a little bit of research, and they might not rush a decision in the same way. Like, it's not necessarily an impulse buy like a new pair of shoes. Typically you don't need to follow up with people on purchasing new pairs of shoes. If they want it, they're going to get it, right? But for the rest of us, we're not in the shoe selling business. We've got to do a bit of work. And so that's where you could kind of think, okay, so I know most people buy from me within about 3 days of making contact. So I could feel that it would be respectful and not too much of an intrusion if I just touched base 3 days after my last message to them, or last phone call, or last whatever it was, to see if they've got any other questions or how I can help them further. And what you'll find is, just by taking the time to follow up, people will really, really respect that, because the most scarce thing any of us have is our time. And people have an underlying respect for you taking the time to make it an inconvenience to you to follow up with them. If you're then in a business-to-business environment, and let's say, I don't know, sometimes it can take, like, if you're selling websites, for example, it can take months before people are going to choose to move that, right? Because to get that to top their priority list, unless something really breaks, it's not going to happen. But consistent follow-up, perhaps every couple of months, to see if that's still a business priority for them. How's cash flow going? Is that still of strategic importance? That sort of stuff. People will really respect that. And what it does is it prevents your sneaky little competitors getting in between, if that makes sense, because it means you stay front and center. And by front and center, when the niggly thing that's the problem that your product, service, business offers as a solution, they think of you. And so then they'll come and say yes. And so this is where, for some, sometimes it will be a really quick conversion. And then for others, this is back to playing the long game. So that kind of makes sense. So what you really want to do is think in your customer's shoes, what's the normal time frame that they would choose to engage and take up our services? And then you follow up in a pattern that's not stalkery, but often enough that your competitors can't get the jump on you, and that it just keeps you front and center. And you can do messages, you can do voicemails, you can do emails, you want to make it customer centric and fit your style and your business. So
that's perfect, really helpful.
Do you think, can you see that making a difference for you with your business?
And I think for me personally, there's some customers who are like really hot, really close to wanting to buy, and some who are just kind of getting a rough general idea. So I think even those ones who were really close and have everything mapped out and planned, even if it's been like a month or so since I've talked to them, I think they're probably still the ones to catch up with. And then the less keen ones, maybe like a shorter check-in or something like that. But,
yeah, absolutely. And you could just build this into your business practices, right? Which is, on Tuesday, that's my customer follow-up day. Scroll through who needs following up today, and I'm going to spend an hour following up. I've seen this work time and time again. Same thing, regardless of industry, regardless of price point. And it's amazing what it will do for conversion. And what's amazing is, because you're taking the effort, it's amazing how people will upsell when given a bit of time, because their circumstances might have changed. And like if I think back to my banking days, and let's say, I don't know, I was following up with someone who might have inquired about a debt consolidation personal loan. And then 3-6 months later, I'm still just checking in. How's that going for you? You know, is it something? And then all of a sudden they're like, boom. And then and now I need a credit card, and now I needed this, and now I needed that, because one, you cared, but also you caught me when I was actually, as you just said, Ashley, I was hot and ready to make that move. And so all of a sudden, by being patient, but by following up, you get the whole price. And I've seen that happen more times than I can count. So yeah. So reflection and action here for you guys is, if you were to think about the things that you've bought, both in business and in your personal life, because I think it can be important to segregate the two and to see that there are different patterns when we're purchasing from a business perspective and personally. How many of those were instant purchase decisions? You know, insert shoes here. And which ones took longer? And then which ones that you were considering that you did or didn't purchase? And so just think about your own journey through that and how you found that. And then flip it back to thinking of your ideal customer, looking at your business. How often do your customers buy from you straight away? And it might be one of those things you need to watch over time to just see if you can start to get a feel or a theme for it. And that will help inform what timeframes make the most sense for your business to follow up on. And then this is a little bit of a self-reflection or change it up process type thing. What stops you from following up currently? And what could you change today about your process to remedy that? Because I think this is an amazing quick win for most businesses. So that's some action over on the following up, follow through. And look, you can get so intricate on this, like it is almost worth its own session on itself. So I might put that on the pipeline for later on in the year. So has anyone got any questions for me about any of that, or just any general salesy stuff that maybe you were sort of hoping that I was going to cover in this session, but I haven't yet?
I actually have one.
Lovely. Far away.
So you've listened to your customer, you've told them how you could help them with the problem that they have. All going well. You're using your 2 ears and your 1 mouth. But right at the end, they say, oh no, that's too much money. Wouldn't pay that.
Yeah.
Walk away.
Don't walk away. I think price objection normally signals that, and this can depend on how you're sort of delivering your sales, right? So if you're prospecting in the business to business space, some of this will be how do you position so that your price isn't as much of a fright. But for most people, when they really understand value, price stops being an objection. So it's one of those things that you might not necessarily get it right in that conversation, but as you build your skills over time in terms of listening to what they're saying and then being able to play that back with your solution, you should be able to paint the picture of what your value creates for them. And if you're then engaging with your ideal customer, they then see that match and want to say yes. There's always going to be some people, if I go back to that storefront analogy, there's always going to be someone who's going to walk into the Gucci store who's never going to buy anything Gucci, right? Doesn't matter how good that Gucci salesperson is. They'll go to the Lexus showroom just to have a look. So there's always going to be people who aren't going to want to pay what you charge. It doesn't mean your prices for your products and services aren't reasonable. It's just part of the nature of the game and why you've got to keep talking to as many people as you can. Because the more that you talk to people, the odds are that you will land the ones where the price disconnect's not such a big thing. But I think my experience with price as an objection is still that they haven't understood the value link. but also for some people, you know, cash flow is a thing, doesn't mean that their intentions wouldn't be to work with you or to buy from you in the future. And so this is where, come back to, you want, I don't want to work with you, you're a cheapskate, Annie. You don't want to say that. You want them to leave feeling like they've still got some dignity, and that you know, like, hey, you know, like, I understand this isn't for you right now, but when you are ready and the cash flow is freed up, hey, we're here ready to listen. And then you just, I guess, you prioritize them in your follow-up to know that you're following up, but less from a, they may still become a customer in time, but some stuff's got to shift for them in their brain or with their cash flow for them to come to the price that you're offering. Or you might create another product or service that totally could meet them where they're at. And so that's a perfect way that you can follow up with them, which is, hey, Robin, we were chatting a couple of months ago, and I know that, you know, this thing over here that we were talking about was a bit out of your reach. We've now introduced this thing over here. It's you know, like, it's priced at this sort of a level. Do you want to find out a bit more? And so that's same thing. That's where your power of your follow-up, you know, could help you in that example. Does that kind of help answer the price question?
Mm.
Yeah.
That was actually, yeah, to put it out to the group there. that it is, I know that in whatever industry I've worked, you often get that price objection, and a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. And a lot of the time, a price objection for people is the easiest thing that they can think of, is giving you a reason why they don't want to buy from you. And quite often it's actually not the price, it's actually that there's something else. And I mean, you can push it and find out what that other thing is. But I liked your answers, Alana. Very good.
Ashley, did you have another question that was bubbling up there?
I think all of mine was answered really with the follow-up stuff.
Awesome.
I think for my industry, and because it's all just written through email and message, that's probably the best way for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of what you said with the sales stuff was ringing true from when I used to do like person to person, like in retail. So if I was still in retail, that would have been amazing. So I have to keep that in mind if I have a shop one day.
Yeah. Well, think about, how do you translate it, right? Because there's stuff in there that can translate regardless of the channel. So just think about, how do you put a spin on it, given that most of yours is online. I'll take a bit of time to consider that, but definitely the closing questions were really good, and then just how to combat or if they don't want to reply. But I think because my target market is mostly mums as well, and we do get busy, and it's dinner time and bedtime and all that, so I think putting myself in their shoes, like you said earlier, and just maybe messaging them in the evening when like all the day jobs are done and they're actually sitting down on their phones, is probably the best time for me to go and follow up and catch them when they're actually on their phone. So the more empathy we can have like that you know, the better and stronger our businesses will be. Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. Has anyone else got any other questions before we wrap up? No. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and spending some time on a lunch break to learn a little bit more. I will send the recording out, and if you've got any other questions or want to chat further, just reach out and let me know. But thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thanks, Alana.
See ya.
See ya.